Beyond the Hype, a fashion lifestyle tech podcast. Presented by Stephanie Williams and Greg Lewis.
Hey everyone. Today we're diving into something that's becoming more and more important for everyone, Web3 security. It's really easy to get caught up in all the buzz about digital gold and the future of finance.
Right, the potential is definitely exciting.
But let's be real for a second. Some of the headlines out there, they can be kind of scary.
Yes.
We're talking about those crypto heist stories that make you cringe a little.
Yeah.
Like that recent one where a single phishing attack, just one attack, led to a $55 million loss.
It's a lot of money.
It's enough to make anyone think twice about jumping into Web3, right?
Stuff that makes you think.
But, and this is a big but, here's the thing. Knowledge, knowing what's up, that's power. By the end of this deep dive, you'll have the knowledge to navigate the Web3 world much more confidently. We're going to break down exactly how these scams work, the red flags to look out for, and most importantly, the practical steps you can take to protect yourself.
The things you can actually do to stay safe.
Exactly. We'll also be taking a look at a company called PixelPai that's doing some really interesting things in the Web3 security space. But first, let's set the scene a little. The first 6 months of 2024 alone saw a shocking $1.2 billion lost to crypto scams globally. That's a lot of money.
It's a huge amount.
And the biggest culprit.
What do you think it is?
I think it's something we're all familiar with, but maybe don't expect in this new digital world. It's phishing.
Wow, phishing, you're right, it's still around.
Good old-fashioned phishing.
It's kind of amazing, isn't it? Phishing, it really gets at something very human, our trust.
Yeah.
That desire we all have for maybe a quick win, or maybe just that fear of missing out, FOMO.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in a world where transactions can't be reversed and there's a certain degree of anonymity, well, those vulnerabilities, they just become much bigger.
Right. And the thing is, it's not just those crypto whales with millions on the line who are vulnerable. Remember that story from Australia earlier this year?
I think I do vaguely.
Thousands of everyday users were hit by this elaborate phishing scam.
It's concerning how these scams, they actually exploit the very features that make Web3 so appealing. The fact that it's decentralized, the speed of those transactions.
Right.
These can actually work against us if we're not really, really careful.
So we've talked about the risks, but I think it helps to really dive into an example, to really see how these scams actually happen.
Yeah, I think that'd be really helpful.
Remember that $55 million heist we were talking about earlier?
Oh, yeah, the big one.
Yeah, well, it's a bit of a cautionary tale, but it really highlights the tactics these scammers use.
Yeah, for sure.
So in this case, the victim was holding a large amount of DAI.
DAI, okay.
Which is a type of stable coin that's pegged to the US dollar.
Right, I've heard of those.
Now, stable coins, they're often seen as a safer bet in the crypto world, because they're supposed to be more stable.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But this heist shows that even stable coins aren't immune to these kinds of scams.
Right, that's an important point. It's easy to get comfortable when you think you're dealing with a more stable asset. But really, in Web3, you always have to be careful no matter what you're doing.
Absolutely. Vigilance is key. So this person, probably feeling pretty good about their stablecoin holdings, falls prey to, you guessed it, a classic phishing attack.
Oh no, not phishing again.
Yep, phishing. We're talking about those sneaky links disguised as something legit, like a security alert, a software update, you name it. They make them look so real.
Yeah, it's scary how good they are at it these days.
And the thing is, all it takes is one click on that malicious link and boom. The attackers potentially have access to their digital wallet.
It's that easy.
It can be that easy, yeah. And from there, they waste no time.
Oh, I bet.
In this case, the attackers, they immediately took a big chunk of the stolen DAI. We're talking about $27.5 million worth.
Wow.
And they converted it into Ether.
Ether, okay, I see.
Which is the native cryptocurrency of the Ethereum blockchain.
Right, makes sense.
It's almost like they're working from a playbook, Get in, convert to a less traceable asset, disappear into thin air.
And I'm guessing that makes it much harder to track them down.
Exactly. That's what makes these crimes so difficult to investigate. The speed, the anonymity, the fact that you can't reverse the transactions, it all adds up.
It all makes it much harder for law enforcement to do their job.
Exactly. And that's why focusing on prevention is so important. Because while, yes, law enforcement is catching up, the best way to avoid becoming a victim is, to not become a victim in the first place.
Right, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, as they say.
Okay, so we've talked about how these scams work, how they actually play out, but now let's switch gears a bit. Let's talk about how to protect yourself, yeah. Because the good news is It's not as complicated as you might think.
Yeah, exactly. Just being aware of a few things, having the right tools, that can really make all the difference.
For sure. And it starts with the basics, right? We're talking about multi-factor authentication.
Right, the two-factor thing, I've heard of that.
Exactly. It's like having an extra lock on your door, but for your digital life,
Right. So even if someone gets your password, they still need that extra something to actually get in.
Exactly. They need that second factor, like a code from your phone or your email. And you've probably seen it everywhere, right?
Yeah, pretty much every site I use these days.
And there's a good reason for it. It's just a really simple but powerful way to add that extra layer of security.
Makes sense. So what else can people do?
Well, speaking of keeping things secure, let's talk about hardware wallets for a second.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard those are important.
Have you ever used one?
I haven't actually, no.
Okay, so companies like Ledger and Trezor, they're really leading the way here. And the way I like to think about it is, if your crypto is digital gold, like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, that makes sense.
A hardware wallet that's like your super secure vault where you keep it offline, completely separate from, the prying eyes of hackers and all that.
So it's not connected to the internet at all.
Exactly, it's offline. And it really all comes back to this idea of decentralization, right? Which is at the heart of Web3.
Right, that makes sense.
Because in this world, you're essentially your own bank.
It's a big responsibility.
It is a big responsibility, which means you are responsible for keeping your own assets safe. And a hardware wallet gives you that extra peace of mind.
It's like having your own personal Fort Knox.
Exactly. And beyond those core security things, those core measures, there are actually a bunch of other tools that can help too. Things like password managers. Have you ever used one of those?
Yeah, I use one actually. It's a lifesaver, trying to remember all those passwords.
I know, right? It's impossible. VPNs, for when you're browsing online to keep your connections secure. And honestly, even just being really mindful about the links you're clicking on, hovering over them, making sure they look legit. Those things might seem small, but they can really add up.
Yeah, those little things can make a big difference, for sure.
Absolutely. Before we wrap up, I want to circle back to PixelPai for a minute.
Oh yeah, the company we mentioned earlier.
Yeah, exactly. Because they're really tackling this Web3 security challenge head on. And I think what they're doing is super interesting. They're really focused on 3 main areas: identity, digital finance, and then AI.
Okay, so break that down a little. What exactly are they doing in each of those areas?
Yeah, so let's start with identity because I think this is key.
Okay, yeah, makes sense.
One of the big challenges in the Web3 space right now is this idea of anonymity, right? Which, don't get me wrong, anonymity can be a good thing.
Right, privacy is important.
Exactly. But it can also be exploited by bad actors, by scammers. So what PixelPai is doing is they're working to kind of build a more trustworthy ecosystem. And they're doing that by verifying identities, making it much harder for scammers to operate anonymously, in the shadows.
Right. So it's about bringing some accountability to the digital world, which is something we're used to in the traditional financial system.
Exactly. And the cool thing is PixelPai isn't stopping there. They're also developing solutions within digital finance itself.
Okay, so tell me about that. What are they doing on that front?
So they're working on actually building safeguards directly into the transaction process.
Interesting. So like an extra layer of protection built in at the core level.
Exactly, making those transactions inherently more secure. And then on top of that, they're using AI, which is really cutting edge.
Okay, so how does AI fit into all of this?
So imagine a system that can actually analyze transactions in real time as they're happening. And it can spot suspicious activity, red flags, and potentially stop a scam before it even happens.
Wow, so it's like a digital detective for your crypto.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. And I think it's so encouraging to see companies like PixelPai really using technology, not just to, advance Web3 and make it more innovative, but also to make it safer for everyone.
It gives you hope, right? There are people out there actively working on solutions to these problems.
Absolutely. It's a good reminder that as Web3 evolves, the ways we protect ourselves, those will evolve too.
So the big takeaway here, the thing I really want everyone listening to remember is this: Web3 security. It's a journey. It's not about, reaching some final destination where you're completely safe, right? It's about constantly learning, adapting.
Exactly. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and most importantly, stay curious.
I love that. Stay curious.
Check out what companies like PixelPai are doing, explore those resources we've talked about today, and keep learning. It's an ongoing process, but it's so important because your digital future really does depend on it.
Couldn't have said it better myself. As we spend more and more of our lives online, really understanding these concepts, it's not optional anymore.
Yeah, it's essential.
It's essential. And the more we know, the better equipped we'll all be to navigate this exciting world, this new frontier, safely and confidently.
Absolutely. Well said. And on that note, that wraps up our deep dive on Web3 security. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Beyond the Hype, a fashion lifestyle tech podcast.